This episode is brought to you by listeners like you, fueling our podcast and giving us the boost behind this mic. Thank you for your support.
Prepare for warp speed as we embark on a voyage through the vast expanse of science fiction in movies and television series. From distant planets to alien civilizations, we delve into the heart of the unknown, unraveling the tales that have captivated audiences for generations. Get ready to unlock the secrets of the universe on Code Flix.
Greetings, fellow sci-fi and fantasy lovers. Welcome to Code Flix, where we explore the TV shows and movies that shape our imaginations. I'm Andre Bonner, and today's episode we'll be looking at mind control, conspiracy, and Cold War paranoia, way back in the 1962 movie, The Manchurian Candidate. The Manchurian Candidate is one of those films that has a reputation that precedes it, and rightfully so. Like you, I heard it referenced so often in other movies and shows that I had to find out what all this fuss was about. Once I sat down and watched the original, the black and white cinematography gave it that classic old Hollywood vibe. But the story itself, still incredibly gripping. What really stood out to me was how well it captured the mode of its time. Right in the thick of Cold War paranoia, the mind control angle, the idea of someone being used as a pawn without even realizing it, felt both chilling and eerily plausible, especially for that era. That trailer line, "If you come in 5 minutes after the picture begins, you won't know what it's all about," wasn't just a marketing hook. It genuinely fits the movie. There's so much layered intrigue that missing even a few minutes would throw you off. After watching it, I totally understand why it left such a lasting mark and why the term Manchurian Candidate is still thrown around today. When talking about manipulation or hidden agendas, watching the 2004 version afterwards was a nice bonus. It gave the story a modern update, but the essence of the unsettling question remains: who can I trust?
The Manchurian Candidate is a 1962 American neo-noir psychological political thriller film directed and produced by John Frankenheimer. The screenplay is by George Axelrod, based on the 1959 Richard Condon novel The Manchurian Candidate. The film's leading actors are Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey, and Janet Leigh, with co-stars Angela Lansbury, Henry Silva, and James Gregory. The plot centers on Korean War veteran Raymond Shaw, part of a prominent political family. Shaw is brainwashed by communists after his army platoon is captured. He returns to civilian life in the United States, where he becomes an unwitting assassin in an international communist conspiracy. The group, which includes representatives of the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union, plans to assassinate the presidential nominee of an American political party, with the death leading to the overthrow of the U.S. government. The film was released in the United States on October 24, 1962, at the height of U.S. Soviet hostility during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was widely acclaimed by Western critics and was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Supporting Actress, Angela Lansbury, and Best Editing. It was selected in 1994 for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The story is set during and after the Korean War. A U.S. Army platoon is captured by Soviet and Chinese forces and taken to Manchuria, where they are brainwashed. One of the soldiers, Raymond Shaw, played by Lawrence Harvey, is programmed to become an unwitting assassin. Upon returning home, Shaw is celebrated as a war hero after being falsely credited with saving his unit. He even receives the Medal of Honor. Major Bennett Marco, played by Frank Sinatra, a fellow soldier who served with Shaw, begins having recurring nightmares that hint at what really happened during their capture. These dreams reveal that the soldiers were brainwashed and that Shaw was conditioned to carry out political assassinations when triggered by specific cues, most notably, the phrase, "Why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire?" Marco becomes increasingly suspicious and investigates further. He discovers that Shaw's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Iselin, brilliantly portrayed by Angela Lansbury, is actually part of the communist conspiracy. She is a ruthless political operator, using her husband, the buffoonish Senator Johnny Iselin, as a puppet to gain power. Her real aim is to install him as president through manipulation and assassination, with Shaw as her unwitting tool. The climax of the film takes place at a political convention, where Shaw, following his programming, is meant to assassinate a presidential candidate, thereby ensuring Iselin becomes the party's nominee in the ensuing chaos. However, Shaw, beginning to regain his autonomy, breaks free of his programming. In a dramatic twist, he kills his mother and stepfather before taking his own life. Here are a few themes and symbols in the film. Themes: mind control and loss of autonomy. The central theme is the terrifying possibility of mind control, how individuals can be programmed to act against their will, highlighting fears about the erosion of free will and personal identity during the Cold War. Paranoia and conspiracy. The film feeds on the Cold War paranoia of the time, presenting a world where nothing is as it seems and trusted institutions are infiltrated by hidden threats. The dangers of political extremism. The narrative critiques both far-left and far-right ideologies, suggesting that extremism of any kind can be manipulated to dangerous ends. Mother-son power dynamics. A dark, disturbing theme is the manipulative relationship between Raymond Shaw and his mother, which explores how familial bonds can be corrupted for power and control. War heroism and manufactured narratives. Raymond is hailed as a war hero through a false memory, questioning how easily public opinion can be manipulated through constructed narratives. Symbols. The Queen of Diamonds, playing card. A hypnotic trigger used to control Raymond, symbolizing manipulation, hidden programming, and the fragile nature of memory and autonomy. Raymond Shaw. As a symbol, Raymond represents the ultimate victim of political and psychological manipulation, a man stripped of his agency and identity. Television and media appearances. Used throughout the film to show how easily public perception can be swayed, symbolizing the growing power of mass media in shaping political realities. Cold War settings and imagery. The use of military and governmental backdrops reinforces themes of institutional corruption, surveillance, and the fear of ideological subversion. The political convention scene serves as a climax that illustrates the fragility of democratic systems when subverted by covert forces, amplifying the film's commentary on political manipulation. Conclusion. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962, is a chilling political thriller that explores the dangers of mind control, extremism, and mass manipulation during a time of deep national anxiety. Through its rich symbolism and psychologically intense narrative, the film warns of the ease with which truth and identity can be compromised in the pursuit of power. Its enduring relevance lies in its powerful critique of blind patriotism, manipulation through media, and the terrifying potential of psychological warfare. Here's a detailed character analysis of the main figures in The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. Raymond Shaw, Lawrence Harvey. Raymond is the central figure of the film, a decorated war hero who is, in reality, a brainwashed assassin. Emotionally distant and socially awkward, Raymond is a man deeply scarred by his manipulative upbringing and traumatic experiences in the Korean War. Under the surface of his stoicism lies a fragile psyche, exploited by the communists and his mother alike. His internal conflict between control and autonomy represents the broader themes of loss of identity and political subversion. Raymond's character is tragic, a pawn who gains brief clarity before his ultimate downfall. Major Bennett Marco, Frank Sinatra. Marco is Raymond's commanding officer and the protagonist of the story. Haunted by disturbing dreams and inconsistencies in his memory, Marco begins to unravel the truth about Raymond's brainwashing. Intelligent, principled, and relentless, Marco symbolizes the rational conscience and determination to expose the truth. He's a man fighting against both external conspiracies and his own internal doubts. His arc is that of a wartime hero trying to protect his fellow soldier and his country from a hidden threat. Eleanor Iselin, Angela Lansbury. Raymond's mother and one of cinema's most chilling villains, Eleanor is manipulative, intelligent, and ideologically fanatical. She is the driving force behind the political conspiracy to install a totalitarian regime in the U.S. through her influence over her husband and son. Her twisted version of maternal love, one that sees Raymond not as a person but a tool, is both psychological and ideological. She embodies authoritarian ambition, emotional cruelty, and the corrupting nature of power cloaked in patriotism. Senator John Iselin, James Gregory. A bombastic and clownish figure, Senator Iselin is Raymond's stepfather and a clear parody of Joseph McCarthy. He is being used by Eleanor and their communist backers to manipulate American politics through fear-mongering and propaganda. Though he believes himself powerful, he is little more than a puppet. His character represents the danger of demagoguery and political hysteria in democratic systems. Jocelyn Jordan, Leslie Parrish. Jocelyn is Raymond's lost love and the daughter of Senator Thomas Jordan, a political opponent of the Iselines. She represents innocence and the possibility of redemption for Raymond. Her reintroduction into his life briefly offers a glimpse of healing, but that hope is cruelly cut short. Jocelyn's fate underscores the personal costs of political manipulation and the futility of trying to reclaim a stolen identity under such systemic control. Senator Thomas Jordan, John McIver. A liberal senator and a moral counterweight to the Iselines, Jordan is one of the few characters who openly opposes the tide of political fear. He is an honest and principled man, tragically targeted by the very system he tries to uphold. His presence in the story reflects the dangers faced by voices of reason during times of ideological extremism. Summary. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962, uses its characters to explore themes of identity, control, political paranoia, and the dangers of unchecked power. Each character serves a symbolic role in a Cold War nightmare where the enemy is not only external but embedded in the very fabric of American power and family. Here is a detailed overview of the production and design of The Manchurian Candidate, 1962. The Manchurian Candidate, 1962, directed by John Frankenheimer, is a political thriller with elements of science fiction and psychological drama. Known for its daring narrative about brainwashing, communism, and Cold War paranoia, the film's production and design choices reflect a tense, cerebral, and often disorienting atmosphere, supporting its themes of manipulation and control. Clapperboard production background. 1. Development. Based on the 1959 novel by Richard Condon, the film was adapted into a screenplay by George Axelrod. Produced by George Axelrod and directed by John Frankenheimer, the film was considered controversial for its bold political themes, especially during the Cold War era. Starred Frank Sinatra, Angela Lansbury, and Lawrence Harvey. 2. Filming. Shot primarily in black and white, a deliberate artistic and political choice despite color being common by 1962. Filming took place on soundstages and real locations in New York City and California, with stylized interiors built to reflect psychological disarray and rigid political structures. Frankenheimer insisted on unconventional camera angles and compositions, drawing influence from German Expressionism and film noir. Artist palette design aesthetic. 1. Production design. Production designer, Richard Silbert, later known for Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby. The design concept revolved around contrasting environments, sterile, ordered government spaces versus surreal, dreamlike interiors for hallucination and brainwashing sequences. Key elements. Military and political interiors, designed to be geometric, impersonal, and rigid, emphasizing control and lack of humanity. Domestic settings, e.g., the Easeline household deceptively quaint or elegant, used to mask sinister undercurrents, especially for Angela Lansbury's manipulative character. Brainwashing sequences, the most visually distinctive scenes, set in a room that shifts between a ladies' tea garden and a communist re-education hall, symbolizing the duality and dissonance of the protagonist's mind. 2. Cinematography. Cinematographer, Lionel Linden. Known for deep focus photography and wide-angle lenses to distort spatial perception. Stark contrast lighting, shadows and sharp lighting reflected mental instability and tension. Off-kilter framing, conversations shot with characters deliberately off-center or positioned oddly within the frame, creating unease. The use of long takes and handheld camera work in certain scenes, notably the brainwashing sequence and assassination, added realism and tension. Dress costume design. Costumes were crafted to represent social class and ideological affiliation. Military uniforms were authentic and reinforced the themes of duty and identity. Angela Lansbury's character was dressed in elegant, structured garments, signaling both maternal authority and political ambition. Civilian characters were often in muted or mid-century casual styles, grounding the story in a recognizable yet emotionally cool reality. Headphones, sound and music. Composer, David Amram created a sparse, dissonant score blending jazz with orchestral tension, reinforcing paranoia and dislocation. The sound design included sharp, sudden audio cues during brainwashing flashbacks. Subtle ambient audio distortions, giving certain scenes a surreal or threatening undertone. Frankenheimer used silence strategically, especially during moments of psychological revelation or suspense. Brain visual and psychological symbolism. Symbolism and design were used to reflect mental control, political deception, and identity loss. The Queen of Diamonds card motif, simple prop design, but a chilling psychological trigger. Repetitive visual cues, e.g., American flags, portraits, political insignia, reinforce themes of nationalism and subversion. Film frames' influence and legacy. The film's production design and visual language set a new standard for psychological thrillers. Inspired later films like The Parallax View, 3 Days of the Condor, and even aspects of The Matrix. Notable for its blending of noir aesthetics, Cold War commentary, and avant-garde direction in a mainstream political thriller.
So here are my personal insights and interpretations of the film, including some of my favorite moments, themes, and characters. So, of course, I'm going to say it again. This film is from 1960s, right? And so it wasn't necessarily the easiest to watch, but it was interesting in the elements that made it why I even picked it up in the first place, right? And for that reason, that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? And another thing to add context is that I'm not a history buff and I'm not going to claim to know much about history, but I do understand that there was a lot of Cold War paranoia going on. And at that time, it would have came out in the artistic licensings of writing and, producing these things. So there is a lot of that. But then when I was able to watch the Manchurian Candidate 2004 remake with the one with Denzel Washington. It was, almost close. If you were to match up everything almost scene for scene in certain instances, it was so close. There were a lot of liberties taken in terms of the items and even the ending, right? Which at this point is not a spoiler because we're going to be doing a deep dive, right? And you should have watched at least one of these films, right? So just sit back and relax as I go deep into this classic. In the opening scene, we see where a U.S. Army patrol is captured by Soviet and Chinese forces, right? And they would have been taken to a part of communist China. There's actually a part of it called Manchuria or something like that. And then later, 3 days later, suddenly, Raymond Shaw, Captain Ben Marco, returns to UN lines, right? Now, when them reach back, the man them I say, yo, Raymond Shaw, he was the one. It's almost like a robotic thing, like Raymond Shaw, he's the greatest guy. He's the, everything about him, in order for him to be basically recommended for Medal of Honor. Right? We see at one point where he's on a plane and the mother come around him and she did and she talk to him and he's almost like he's zoned out. Like he might wonder how the hell me get here. So like what's going on right now, And it's just echoes that more and more. You see that going on throughout the film where he's in a situation where he's uncertain of what is going on. Like when time you wake up from a half awakened dream, like you feel like you were sleeping, or you weren't fully woken up, So, of course, when he returns and he's granted the Medal of Honor for saving his unit, apparently, right? They start to have some disturbing nightmares. Of course, it's Major Marco and some others, them start to think, it's almost like they're thinking about where they were at the time during their capture, right? Which they've never realized at the time because they were brainwashed out of that. So they are in the dream or the nightmares. They are in a garden club meeting with some old ladies and, the cinematic license of blending between the scenes. So, that was expertly done. I was so impressed with that part because it just basically said, boy, all right, so 1 minute here I watch some old ladies at a garden club and they're like almost like them a talk to these army guys and stuff and thing. But then you see where at various intervals, the ladies where you'd think say actually are some top ranking officials from the Soviet and Chinese forces. So it almost like you see them, actually being there. So what is actually happening is that these guys, they are all dreaming in a particular way. Some of them half remember part of the dream and the other one might have part. So it's almost like a puzzle, right? And one of them would have been dreaming that Shaw kills one of the soldiers them in them command, right? Because they were basically testing them, I guess. And so, they ask Raymond Shaw for kill so that they can proof of concept basically that this is actually something that they can do. Yeah. So back in the US now, back in that day, so the Marco now he gets assigned to the Army Intelligence in Washington, right? And he can't help but, as I said, be caught up with all of these things and, something not to line up with the way how things go, right? Also, talk to him superiors. Now, this is something that is very crucial because a lot of times, you bring these things to some people sometimes and say, boy, I got through something, some psychological issues, whatever it is, right, in real life. Sometimes people don't take things from you in that way. If you say, boy, I'm gonna take it serious about certain things, or I'm gonna try and see how I can help you. Sometimes, they're very dismissive, especially when it comes to psychological things. We know in Jamaica, it's not one of the best things if you're going through some psychological issues, because many persons have the stigma that, being mentally unsound means, say, you're definitely mad, right? And mad being, loony, balloony. You know what I'm saying? But it's not always that way, because sometimes all you need is just because there are some treatment, or, you need to talk to somebody, right? You need people to actually listen. So not just talk to somebody, but actually have people who listen to you and try to help you through these things, right? And perhaps in America at that time, that was something that wasn't being done well, right? I don't know about now, but probably it wasn't being done well, where soldiers would return from these wars and so on, and there would be some serious PTSD going on. And there was nowhere for them to return, no way for them to, well, at least in the 2004 version, what I saw, it's kind of echoed the same sentiment, like, hey, them, yes, there were people you could talk to, but it's like them just basically say, oh, I'm mad, so we're gonna just put your take your front line and whatever, and we're gonna basically upend your life in terms of what makes things continue, and you can't just do that, because you basically are taking away a man's liberties. It's almost like you basically put him in a prison. He has no rights. He have nothing at all. When I say if you make him continue do what he do, and say he must suffer from something there, but there aren't a lot of compassion or emotions that can express how you will feel in a certain situation unless you're in it, right? So my point is that, perhaps we need to start being more kind and gentle to one another and trying to understand what a man go through and how you see certain things that happen to him, not necessarily write him off and don't make him feel like, you're not trying to, be caring and understanding, right? Because any one of us, it can happen to something can happen and can cause us to go off, in certain ways. May not be the deep end, but we can be at a level where the one bad thought, one bad word, one bad thing can just throw away off totally, right? Yeah. And I would even want to talk about persons who have some serious issues. And, a friend of mine recently said to me that, if you feel like you understand and you feel like, say, you can empathize with someone, at least that would make the person feel a little bit better. It might not fix their problem, but at least it may make them feel a little bit better, and they might be able to open up even more. We'll be right back after these messages. Now, before we go any deeper, let me ask you something. Are you still listening, or is it someone making you listen? No? I'm kidding. Probably. But here's what's not a conspiracy. This podcast grows because of you. No shady algorithms, no brainwashing subliminals, just you. Hitting follow, sharing with the right person, maybe even leaving a rating if you feel so compelled. So, tell me, who's one person you know who'd love this? A coworker? A friend? That oddly observant barista who definitely knows too much? Share it. Then meet me back here next time, if you remember to. So, meanwhile, now back in the movie, another soldier from the patrol, him also have the same dream. As I mentioned, there are many of them who have the same dream, right? It was a black guy too, right? Make that very clear, right? And the he later dies under some very suspicious circumstances. Yeah, in even going back through and trying to figure out how I'm going to deal with this deep dive, I didn't find much information about this man, right? In terms of the character himself, because it just seemed like his whole deal was that he was going to be a part of the team and he was going to be the one that would die out of the team. So, of course, this make Marco look even deeper into the thing. He has to investigate, because after him report and he must say, oh, boy, how does PTSD you have? So, just turn up over there so until we can deal with that. And it's almost like, there isn't anything for say, boy, let us talk to the other persons who went through this, because they might not be presenting themselves, but they could be going through the same thing. And so you need to talk to them and find out what is going on, Yeah, and get them in a room, let them talk to one another as well, right? And share on this. And if they did, none of this would have happened. Anyways, it wouldn't be the movie if it never happened, right? Now, Raymond Shaw, him live in New York, right? With his mother, Eleanor, right? And she's a very powerful political figure, right? She is married to Senator John Islin, and this man is a very loud, buffoonish, figure who, manipulates her for his own goals. Now, this man I could equate to a particular politician, and I won't mention that person's name because we all know who I'm talking about, right? If you watch this film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This man, know how to chat foolishness and make it sound sweet like honey, right? Anyways, Eleanor used Raymond's medal to bolster her husband's credibility, right? So she basically pushed him because, back in them days, the men were out there and thing and the women stay. But she was very, very pushy. And this is one of the things about this film. It's just basically showing, say, hey, woman have some power, And so she pushed the man, gain some political traction, right? Now, of course, Raymond not really into all of this, but it's almost like he's closed off emotionally from his mother and his stepfather, right? He detests both of them. Now, Raymond would have had a love interest, right? And we would have been seeing that him and her, that is Jocelyn Jordan, and she's a daughter of a political rival of our mother and his stepfather. No, so they would have been together, and thing, and the man really have deep feelings for her. Raymond really have deep feelings. Of course, Eleanor wants to get the relationship to end, and Raymond and Jocelyn, them would have accidentally reunite, right? And this would have brought back the feelings and the emotions and stuff, the romance. Yeah, man, big things go on, right? Them marry in a secret without nobody knowing, and then basically deciding how them going to live them life. You know how it goes, and you marry and you're gonna plan your life together. It was beautiful, man. It was really beautiful. I say was because, yeah, we're gonna get into that part. Now, Marco, him uncover the brainwashing plot, and how him uncover it now is that he started to follow Raymond, right? And when him follow Raymond went into a bar, I believe. When he went to the bar, Raymond was drinking and stuff. Marco came in after. The bartender, would have been there, and he slipped out of his mouth that, why don't you play some cards to pass the time? And that's a trigger, a mental trigger that they put into Raymond's brain, and he actually would take a pack of cards and play those cards. So my boy did he play a card, right? And what happened is that he's playing cards until him find a queen. When him find the queen triggers him, and whatever someone says right after that, he will carry out with no question, right? So what I remember is that happened right there, and Raymond end up walking out of that bar. Marco, they behind him, kind of wonder where I go. Raymond go into a river, almost like him about to drown himself. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Now Marco realized, boy, this thing has happened now, right? And figure it out. Say, and how him get to figure it out, him try one experiment again with Raymond, and him realize, say, him obedient to any command. Yeah? Yeah. Now, of course, you had to have someone who was the least expected, who you could think that, hey, that person seems like they could not be the bad guy. And that was a bad woman, not a guy. It was Eleanor Islet, Raymond's mother. She was his handler. You hearing me? This woman will say, I'm mother. The woman will say she would have given birth to him. And as Jamaicans say, push him out of her belly. He was under her control, right? She was the one who was working with the Soviet agents. They were planning to use Raymond to assassinate a presidential candidate at the party convention, right? This assassination would have catapulted now Senator Inslet, her husband, into the presidency as a puppet of the foreign powers. And, this is 1962. I don't know why it is that this is so relevant today. You get what I'm saying? I don't know if you get what I'm saying. If you get what I'm saying, you don't. But, again, she coldly explains to Raymond, say, that she'll basically plan to use him for political chaos, right? Now, before this happened, of course, I believe Raymond and Marco, when Marco was figuring out the facts that the trigger and all of that, he tried his best to give Raymond a command to help him. And the command was to basically help him to unbrainwash himself, I guess, right? I don't know how effective it would be or what he was thinking it would be like. But what was funny about that particular scene to me was that him basically tell him, said, don't tell nobody. It's like a side pocket thing. Like me and you for go work out something differently. Cause maybe I can use this later on. That's what I got from the film. Okay. I might be watching the wrong thing, but hey, I'm telling you, that's what I got. But anyways, him did try to help unbrainwash him still, no. But me I saying kind of you look like him did want to use Raymond at the same time. Yeah. So, of course, probably it would have helped in some ways because Raymond seems to be a little bit different in the way he's following these commands now from his mother, right? So at the political convention, Raymond hides in a tower with a high-powered rifle, right? So man, get ready now to kill the presidential nominee, right? For cause the chaos and martial law and whatever, right? So it's almost like in that moment, as I said, he was breaking his programming at that moment. He was able to set the gun not on the political rival, but on his mother and stepmother, right? Him kill them basically, ending them plot, right? After he does that, I guess either that was a part of the programming or it wasn't, but the man take him life, right? And perhaps a part of it was to that him know say boy he would never be free because he was programmed that way, and yeah, anybody else would have tried to use him, right? In the final scene, we get the aftermath of what happened. Marco basically I feel reflect. I'm deeply affected about what happened, right? And the film ends with a very ambiguous note. A man used and discarded by his country and family who died trying to reclaim his soul. Yeah, that's it. So here are my theories about unresolved mysteries or plot points. So some key things that, I found very strange. One was with the way how Ben Marco was approaching a situation of using the force deck to try to get Shaw to be deprogrammed. And then there was the other thing that was very, very concerning to me, that if it was an emotional connection that he needed, at that point, perhaps when he went to kill his girlfriend, his wife, I should say, right? Because they married and thing, but he go to the house and him end up kill our father because he was, commanded to, and then him end up kill her because she is a witness, right? Because that's how the programming works, right? They ensure that you take out anybody who see you in the act of doing what you're doing. Yeah, and perhaps this is what, was the springboard. This was enough emotional turmoil for him to be able to break free from that programming, in that moment when he killed his stepmother and, stepfather and mother. I say stepmother, but I'm mother. Yeah. And then there's the moment where, it was just kind of funny that him accidentally get set off, right? I know the programming has to be a particular phrase and whatever, and so it should be a very rare phrase, but then it seemed to be a very common phrase that a person would be able to just say it, and then him being in earshot get triggered, because of that. Yeah, so I did talk about the fact that Major Ben Marco, played by Frank Sinatra, by the way, right? Really, really good, most of the roles that went play. He would have been investigating this whole thing, and him himself is at the center of a larger conspiracy, I think, because the relationship we have with Rosie, right, Eugenie, right, who this woman, she no know the man from Adams, yeah, and on the train she just basically a fan over him, just a you know what I'm saying? I mean, I can understand that, hey, probably she is taken aback, she's the 1960s woman that, just fall over. But I mean, that just seemed very, very odd, the way how she seems to be so interested in what he is about and what he's doing, right? And at some point, we're getting the feeling that there could be something greater to it, because the film did end ambiguously. So we could have seen that Rosie turned out to be Marco's controller, right? And that he is also another sleeper, right? Spoilers for those who have not watched, and I tell you, go and watch both movies. The 2004 version, it is suggested that, yeah, Rosie did have some agenda, but it wasn't her that was controlling Marco in that one, but Marco was the assassin in that one. Anyways, there was a particular point where Rosie was calling a man the general. Yeah. That was a very rare occurrence. So, yeah, there's a possibility that there was something to it. And when we look at the extent of the brainwashing beyond that of Raymond Shaw, right? the film already did suggest it from the beginning, so that the entire platoon was captured and the whole of them, they get the brainwashing, right? Yet only Shaw we saw that actually, carried out assignments and was the assassin, So the others, like Marco and Allen, they would have been subjected to it. They were having nightmares. Even when Marco had approached Shaw about the whole idea of the nightmares and stuff, it's not like Shaw did say no. He didn't say yes either. He didn't, in either direction, he didn't give an indication. So we are wondering if it is that basically they chose Shaw either specifically because perhaps he had an aptitude for it, or it was easier for them to control him, or he was basically the final version. They tried it on all of the other guys, but it never worked out so well with others, or they found that they were not so stable, right? The programming wasn't being stabilized on them, but for him, it was just like that, But if it is that, as we would have talked about, that idea that all of them was subjected to it, could it be a case where they were just there waiting to be activated, just like how they ensured, the movie did show, they ensured that Shaw was still under their control, right? Fully under their control. So they actually, got him to come in, and under his program state, then basically asked him, do you remember me? Do you know what we're about? And he was like, no, man, I know who he is, but yeah, you sound good. Me just have to talk to you and thing. And, you never know, right? Then there is also the whole idea of the mother's dual role and motivations. Now, Eleanor, she's Shaw's mother, right? And is handler. She seems to be a very complex character, right? Because the fact that she's able to orchestrate this political manipulation to get her son to become the unwitting program assassin, right? So she has some motivations, and that motivation we don't really get from the film. Apart from the fact that probably she want the power, she want to be able to, get into the White House and stuff. But, what would have been her final thing in terms of, yes, we get the power now. What do I do with it? What is that all about, right? And is it that she would have wanted to use this now to turn the tide of the US, of the country in whatever way that she wanted? Some of the scenes, we have some exchange between Marco and Rosie, right? Have some Chinese elements, right? Even though they seem not to be involved in the conspiracy. So the film kind of does make you think about it. And if you're that paranoid, you might be thinking, that there's several layers of this conspiracy going on within the film, beyond what you actually see. Yeah. And even some people, have taken on a certain belief or thinking that, the film was a direct interpretation of real life events. I'm well aware of, all of the unsanctioned experiments that were performed even on black people, and some of the experiments did go into mind control, and deprivation, and all sorts of different fringe science kind of beliefs at the time. And perhaps some of it is owing to the fact that we want to protect ourselves, so we try to be the aggressor, or we try to be first to the table. Even the fact that the moon missions, right, getting a man on the moon wouldn't have happened that quickly if there wasn't a race to do so in order to ensure that a particular country got there first. They want to be the first ones there. They want to ensure that they can always proclaim that they went to space first, and whether it was all they're doing, or was it because they wanted to keep their dominance, keep that level of, we want to be at the table, we want to be talked about. We don't want nobody else to say we don't have that technology, we don't know how to get there. So they kind of basically say, all right, they want to go and be the first to do it. They want to make sure that they're doing it that way, right? In my own opinion, this film is a masterclass in American propaganda, right? At its finest. And I say this because of all of the things that it tries to give us the idea of, the others, them, they. Who are they? Who are these others? And many times the others are these other countries, whether it be the Soviets or the Chinese or the Koreans or whoever it is. They want others to believe in them and not in the others. They will write the story for them. Just as they say, history is written by the conquerors. Whoever has the power will be able to make the story. And even now, that is so true to life, even with how things have gone in recent times. So I think the only thing I can say at the end of this is that it's kind of hard to determine where we're going to go if we can't trust anyone, right? And it's hard to trust when persons aren't forthcoming with things, yeah? And most of the times they aren't forthcoming with the things because they fear being out there without a paddle, without a boat, without anything at all. And that's it for my theories and unresolved mysteries. Please share your theories, whether you agreed with my theories, whether you thought that Ben Marco was actually a spy. Let me know of that in the comments. So in this episode, we looked at the Manchurian Candidate from 1962. Mind control, conspiracy, and Cold War paranoia. And what paranoia can really do. Because fear itself is so deeply entrenched in our humanity. It's what drives us to do certain things, to plan in the way that we plan, to be the people we are. But fear doesn't have to control every aspect of what we do, right? Nobody is saying that you need to be blissfully ignorant of the dangers out there, but we measure those things against the evidence, right? What does the evidence state? This is how I live. Because if I was to live on just the paranoia, I'll be very paranoid. I'll be the guy shouting in the microphone, they are trying to poison us. But instead, I'll sit and do my research. I'll try to understand the world that I live in. I'll try to make sure that what I do believe comports with reality, and that whatever happens, we can trust the evidence. We don't have to just trust our senses because our senses can tell us anything. Our senses can be fooled. Our senses can put us into problems. Yeah. That brings us to the end of this episode. Our voyage to the universe of sci-fi television continues. And we're closing in on 1,000 downloads. Your support keeps us going. Engage with us, share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation alive. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, stay curious.